Welcome back to the Roll Up Podcast. I'm Andy, and today we're talking about crypto as a force for the democratization and decentralization of artificial intelligence. AI has been a massive narrative in crypto, and people are really wondering why it's important. A little while, we didn't really understand why we need crypto and AI. Why does AI need to be on chain? After this episode, we really dug deep into AI smart agents and why crypto and blockchain are very important for the future of AI. We kind of believe that AI is a divergent path, and we want to see it be used for good. Hope you guys enjoy, and let's dive right in.
Welcome back to the Roll Up for an episode today about AI and modularity, AI agents building systems for the future of on-chain interactions, and maybe they're not going to be humans. Rob, we're in Modular March, or on the tail end of Modular March. Welcome. We have Mike from Talus and Ben as well, who we met in Denver, and welcome, guys.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Robbie. Ben, nice seeing you again.
Great to see you
Pleasure to
guys
be here.
Pleasure having you guys on. I think all of us are still humans here, at least for the moment. So I think that's kind of like where my head is at. Is like sooner or later we're gonna reach a point where AI agents are kind of like acting for themselves. And even before we started, before we hit record, we were talking about why AI is so powerful that it makes it very important not to be centralized. So let's kind of start on this like decentralized AI front. Like, why is it important that AI is decentralized?
Yeah. So thinking about AI is that it's too powerful. It's an exponential technology, and at some point, like some big firm is going to take all that power, and we're currently seeing that with like OpenAI, even like Anthropic. Like they're all running all these like resources and models and applications, and they're reaping all the benefits of it, right? They're blocking the gates for people to like customize, to adapt, to use, to leverage in whatever tool or setting they want to use AI. They're having issues with data, with compute power, and in the end, if we want to see AI transcend how we interact with systems and how we work with other people, because at the end of the day, we'll have agents interacting with agents and us not doing most of the work. We definitely need some type of ownership of the people, right? Like, there's no way that we're gonna have and see all these like huge entities own what we do, what we say, how we do, because all these other influences and models will have a lot of they'll just like change the way that we think and how we interact with systems, and there definitely needs to be a way that we should control it rather than them deciding what we do and how we interact with all these other applications.
Yeah. And before we get too deep, guys, like I know we can get deep into like decentralization and kind of like AI on chain, but like, can we just start with first principles? Like, what is crypto and AI? What is the use cases? Why have I seen so much like crypto times AI is a scam? Like why? What is the intersection at like the fundamental level that you guys are seeing? Like for somebody who's new to this idea of bringing AI into crypto, like what does that even mean?
Yeah, so Talus believes that the two most transformative technologies in the world today are crypto and artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence has incredible potential to help humanity in a plethora of ways and really improve everyone's lives. But it's at risk of becoming centralized and controlled by just a few very powerful actors like much of Web 2 has. Web 2 in aggregate is a fantastic technology that's worked out very well for humanity, but it's come with very serious consequences, much of which are caused by the fact that it's so centralized and that just network effects and things trend towards just a few very large companies controlling most of Web 2 or in our Web 2 experiences. AI is very susceptible to this. If you think about the inputs of what it takes to make AI, right? Compute, data, and then whatever model you're running. Just breaking this down into the most basic building blocks. Compute. Who has all the computing power? Which organizations right now can subsidize really high OpEx at a very early stage, right? It's very tough for startups to do that. We're talking about Facebook and Google here and Apple. These are the companies with huge resources to fund compute. Who has all of the data? Again, because of the way that Web 2 has progressed, Google, Apple, Facebook, the large Web 2 companies are the ones who already have all of the data about us. And they have access to a lot of proprietary data that's not on the open web, that's not accessible to open models. And then the last thing is, where are models trending right now? Models can go one of two ways. We have open models that train on the open web, or we could have somebody who looks at this a little bit more like iOS and like ChatGPT and says, we want a proprietary closed source model. We don't want anyone to be able to look at this. We want to monetize this as much as possible. And we want to accrue as much proprietary data as possible to train this model so that we have the advantage. So right now in Web 2, again, I think AI has incredible potential. It's one of the most important technologies ever created. But the way that it's taking shape in Web 2, there is some risk there, right? There is some risk there that this could become this, draconian technology that influences our lives in more of a negative way. So at Talus, we're thinking about those inputs and thinking, how can we make these accessible to everyone? And that's exactly what Talus is. We're the nexus where all of the inputs required for AI can come together and people can create products with these inputs that are more decentralized and can benefit humanity in ways that we aren't able to see in Web 2, like with smart agents.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, so the core idea here is that there's this bucket of compute, of power, which there's a limited amount of, and you have to bid or purchase this compute or this power to function these models, to operate these different models. And right now, what you're saying is that this source of power is either expensive or only available to big companies or companies with a lot of money, or one and the same, or both. And that access could lead to a more centralized output of AI control. And so where blockchain comes in is opening that access, amongst other things, and even potentially streamlining the processes of like renting AI and payments and things. Like maybe break it down even further. So that's like, is that the right kind of like mental model?
To train AI, you need a ton of computing power. You need a ton of data, and you need to select what kind of model you run, an open source or a closed source model. Open source meaning, just like the software, anyone can look at it. Closed source meaning that this is proprietary data. This is closed to everybody else. We want to keep this a trade secret. With compute, it's very unlikely that you have a ton of GPUs lying around at home. If you did, congratulations, because you probably sell those for a lot of money. It's very unlikely. You create a lot of data every day. It's literally impossible in Web 2. This is one of the problems in Web 2, and another reason we need blockchain technology. It's impossible to keep track of the data that you create and to take ownership of your data. This is not, you can't own things in Web 2. And then, with models, like I said, we're starting to see the trends that a lot of people are prioritizing those closed source models. And I think it's a much better world where we have open source models that train on open web data.
I want to add to what Ben is saying, but it's compute, it's data, it's storage, is models or algorithms that like come together to build all these agents. But I think one of the biggest promises of decentralized AI is transparency and verifiability. So what does transparency mean? Is that you know that the actual model is doing what it should be doing. And verifiability means that the output that you're getting or the inference comes from the right model. And like with a blockchain, it's very easy. Like it's sovereign technology. Like you could see everything is like completely transparent. Like, you could see what input goes in, what's the output, and the actual model should not behave as a black box. And then with like cryptographic algorithm, like CK proofs, so now we're seeing like CKML, OPML, now like crypto economic ML or TEML, which people are starting to explore. There's like different verifiability or different computational verifiability that could say, okay, so this output actually came from the model, and we could know that, okay, OpenAI is not lying to me when you just like submit like, okay, do this like task, and they just like tell you how to do it instead of doing it because they want to save on compute. Like all these things that all these centralized companies or centralized AI providers remove control from the user from, and that's all like the biggest promise of decentralized AI as well.
Yeah, I want to double click on something that Ben kind of illuminated here, which are the three parts: the compute, the model, and the data. I think data is pretty self-explanatory. Like either we give our data or these big Web2 companies take our data unbeknownst to us. The models are like the weights, right? It's going to prioritize some things. If it knows that you're a male and someone else is a female, then it's going to prioritize some algorithm to show you what it thinks you want to see. And then the compute. And here I want to take a step back, because my understanding of AI is that it's basically a big matrix multiplication. It's taking the inputs and weights and putting them in a matrix and multiplying them together. And so your data is going to impact the weights. But all that's happening here when we're running these AI models is that it's trying to predict, in the case of large language model, it's trying to predict the next word that a human would say, or it's trying to predict the next word that you want to hear. So when it comes to compute, all these different AI firms and even users are trying to use the computing power for the matrix that I want to compute. It's trying to like use that power for the prediction that I want to try to predict, the matrix I want to multiply. And so there's an access problem and there's a cost problem to using the computing power for that particular matrix multiplication problem. Mm-hmm. And so I just think it's helpful to remember that running these AI models is just multiplying matrices together. And so when it comes to who has the computing power, there's this idea of decentralized compute, where it's kind of like this open marketplace and anyone can use this compute for whatever matrices I want to multiply. And then there's like this walled garden, and these walled garden types of ecosystems are cutting off certain matrices, cutting off certain models so that only those with access or resources to purchase this computing power are able to run the models that they want to run.
So, Robbie, you mentioned one word that I want to highlight, which is like open marketplace. Internally, we've been highlighting that a lot because it's not like you need to have people to be able to access whatever resources they need for this matrix multiplication to like provide data to models to like fine tune them or improve them, to like get that storage capability where like actually the models are going to be stored. Because if the models are like, let's say tens of gigabytes that you need to store someplace, like it's going to get more expensive throughout time, and all that access and open access and verifiability definitely needs to come into place in one single place where everybody could come, where Andy could come and say, okay, I want to use that specific model from that provider with this GPU specific GPU cluster. Okay, you could do that. Or if you want to choose like a separate data set that Robbie provided to fine-tune your model based on Robbie's data, you could do it. And on top of that, something that's like super interesting is, how does ownership and monetization look like, right? Like, how do you make sure that Robbie's actually paying for what he's using, or that he's getting paid for what he provides to the ecosystem? And let's say, what if like Robbie and Andy at the same time want to own the same model? Like, you can't do that in like centralized ecosystems in a trustless manner.
Yeah. And that's the decentralized compute aspect. Now, you guys have hit on verifiable compute as well as something that's separate from the decentralized, or as a benefit of a decentralized model. What does that mean? What is verifiable compute?
Well, just generally the idea in blockchains is that it should be very easy to verify that somebody did something, right? So either as blockchains as replicated state machines either means everybody's redoing the same work, right? Like OG Ethereum, just all these nodes that are recomputing all these problems. For more advanced blockchain technology takes that and says, okay, well, we have much more creative ways that we can tell if somebody's telling the truth, right? We can verify if somebody's telling the truth without having to redo all this work. Adding this behind, AI and AI models would be groundbreaking, right? That would be in talking about these two paths we can go down, right? Like the more negative, more draconian look for AI and Web 2 versus how this could really be beneficial for everybody, maximum beneficial for everybody, and we mitigate a lot of the risks. Verifiable compute is something that blockchain technology enables. That's right up there with taking the good path. As Robbie said, this is a little complicated, but yes, like AI training LLMs, for instance, is just a lot of floating point math, like a lot of just replicating all of these matrix operations. A lot of that's required for like a lot of the how the hardware operates. That's what GPUs are optimized for. And one thing that Robbie mentioned was the parameters behind changing models. So one thing that you could do basically with governance, with the decentralized nature of voting with tokens, is controlling the weights on chain, so that even if the model doesn't live on chain, you can control the weights of the parameters on how that model is trained. There's nothing like that in Web 2, where users of a product could actually have a say in how this AI is trained, and can direct it in whatever direction that they want. So this is something that hopefully Talus is going to be able to enable.
Yeah. So I think that we've got the, and I'm just taking this a very just like step-by-step approach here, guys, bear with me. And I think our audience is probably in the same boat. We've got decentralized compute. We've got we've got decentralized compute for AI as a means of solving this kind of centralization problem of expensive GPUs and kind of gated access to compute. Then we've got verifiable compute, which is like the properties of blockchains, what we know of them as today, for creating kind of censorship resistance and permissionless systems. And so we have these two kind of core pillars here. The thing that I'm kind of trying to get over in my mind is like, there's a finite amount of compute in the world, of GPUs, of like hardware, and there are companies and people all trying to access this for AI models. Like, how exactly does average Joe Andy get access to AI models or AI compute through Talus or through a decentralized AI crypto company, which I wouldn't be able to get access to otherwise? Like how am I going to go and access that compute? And what am I going to go and do with that? Like, create a model, or kind of like, what are the possibilities? I'm sure they're kind of endless, but yeah, I'm curious, like, how do I go and use this?
So the way that we look at it is building a platform where everybody could come and like provide their compute, provide their models, provide their data. So Andy could come and say, okay, I want to use this specific compute cluster that Robbie provided or that Ben provided. And then I want to like put together that compute with what the model that Ben provided. And let's say if you want to even like fine tune that model, you could use the data that I provided. So it's kind of like this, like putting together the most like basic building blocks for AI resources, where like anybody could come and anybody could provide in an incredibly neutral manner whatever compute and whatever verifiably spectrum there is. So it could be like, let's say CK, OP, from like TE, or it could be like completely centralized, right? It really depends on the use case, with whatever model is in the market or has been provided or committed to the network. And then on top of that, you have like a solid like SDK framework that enables you to put together all these different resources to build the applications.
And even that was very low level. It just keeping it at a high level. Like, what does that mean for your users or your listeners? This might be helpful to get into what a smart agent is, but basically, what Talus enables, this new AI use case that you can't do in Web 2 for a lot of the reasons that I just mentioned. And I'll throw one in there too. That's liquidity, right? AI can't open a bank account. So there's no such thing as like a banking API that you can just plug in an existing AI model today, and AI can execute transactions for you. The future that we see, like the next great unlock with AI, is actionable AI. So right now we have very performative generative AI. You go on ChatGPT or Claude 3 or something, and you can ask it questions, and it'll give you answers, right? Or it'll create new data for you, like write me a poem, whatever. the AI today is still not actionable, right? So you can ask ChatGPT, I want to leave New York to LA. What's the best flight to take on if I want to leave this date and keep it under this amount of money? It can give you an answer, but it can't book the flight for you. And the biggest reason for that is because AI can't open a bank account, right? AI is going to have to use USDC and not USD. So that's in addition to all of those other inputs that we bring together for AI, liquidity is the next thing that we want to add in there. That's chief among those. So I say all this to say that in the future, what you're going to be able to do with smart agents on Talus is execute user intents. So right now we're starting with DeFi use cases, taking this idea of intents in DeFi, like I have this amount of USDC, give me as much ETH as possible, automating that process to make it very user friendly, and then expanding that to a whole plethora of use cases in crypto. But anyway, going back to your original question, we've talked a lot about the back end, and we keep talking about inputs and data and floating point arithmetic and all this stuff. One of our chief concerns here at Talus is making sure that we are very UX friendly, right? So the average person is going to be able to interact with our platform. They're not going to have to worry about all the blockchain and LLM and model stuff on the back end. They're just going to be able to execute with our smart agents.
So cool. Like that's like the UX unlock is like I can just natural language type English into a search engine, and then it'll go execute whatever action I ask it to. It'll do research first, and then it'll go start to perform those actions. And I think the example of when we start putting money behind these actions, that's when it becomes so important to verify. The verifiability becomes ever so important for those actions, right? Because it's just obvious. If I'm gonna put money behind something, I'm gonna want to verify that it's doing the thing that I ask it to do. So just tying this together, it's like, okay, once we start to insert monetary value into these AI agents, like we don't want these agents to go rogue at any point, but let alone if they have money and it's a significant sum of like savings or checking account, right? Like they're gonna have a lot more power than they do right now. And it's very important to make sure that we have those domiciled and we have those like verifiably crossing these checkpoints, at which point we can say, no, like you weren't supposed to do that. Don't do that. Or yes, keep going.
I think like right now, well, everything started, or blockchain interaction started as like just being humans. Like you send the transaction, you're the only one who interacts with the blockchain. Now we're starting to see a bit more of like AI aided blockchain interactions where like, okay, let's say ask an LLM what you should do in the blockchain, or like how should you interact, or like just explain me what this project does, or even like audit this smart contract to see if it's worth me interacting with it. I think the next stage, and is like specifically what you guys are talking about, where like everything is going to be completely AI oriented, right? Like you're not only going to just like ask the LLM to do things or the agent to do things, but you won't even like interact with blockchains, right? Like they'll just manage and do everything for you. Like you just like deposit like, let's say 100,000 USDC or even like 1 USDC for whoever doesn't have like that much money or like much time to invest. And the idea is the agent would like manage and generate wealth and generate value for whoever owns or like provides access to that agent. And it's been like slowly but surely, and you've seen this in like other industries, like where it starts like only human, then human plus AI in a guarded way, until we make sure that these agents actually really work in the way that we want them to work. And then off to the future is, okay, agents like interact with each other like in an open ecosystem, talk to each other, like figure out what are the best strategies and make sure that they all happen on behalf of the users without them having to do anything.
I'd like to revisit like a very early question for in this conversation, which was the decentralized AI question. And we speak a lot about cloud computing and how blockchain is now this like new era of cloud. And specifically, it's like this verifiable cloud. So could you guys talk a little bit about why smart agents are not possible on the Web 2 version of the cloud, but they become possible on the Web 3 version of compute?
So the main definition of a smart agent is a program or a piece of software that executes actions on a certain direction with like predefined goals. Like that's a vanilla definition of like smart agents. It can act, it can communicate, it could do all these things in autonomous ways. Smart agents are sometimes like you could say that they're possible in Web 2. Like they are, like you could see like bots that go and like trade, and that is a Web 2 smart agent, right? I think what Web 3 does, and Ben, you could add into this as well, is it makes it verifiable, it makes it trustless, and I think one of the biggest value adds, and Ben touched a point around this earlier, is that you have the open infrastructure for them to interact and communicate, right? Like you don't know if like Robbie's agent will be able to send a payment to Andy because he cannot connect to his bank account, or even like send a payment through Stripe. Like building all these agents right now, and if you know anything about like just how like build agents in traditional way, like you have to code and connect directly to each single like API and their different like formats, and like scrape the web and see how the different like front ends look like, so you could like provide the data and then like scrape it to like understand what's the whole like context of the website and the applications. And that is too cumbersome to scale. Like I think agents need a whole like simplistic open infrastructure to see, okay, so this smart contract looks like this, the function is like exactly the same as with interacting to any other protocol. Let's just like put that together and in a seamless way like execute on chain. And I think like Web 2 is too brittle or too siloed. And Balaji wrote a post about this, like, okay, how do like decentralized Web3 databases are all like, or like blockchains have like this different like data models within one single set, and like putting all this together is like, okay, so the smart agents will interact with each other, will like transfer data, would communicate in an open ecosystem, and that's what I think that's one of like the biggest promises of Web3.
Like Mike said, there are some very low performing smart agents in Web 2. Nothing like what we're going after. But yes, you're correct in that cloud basically scaled the modern internet, like as we know it today. So for something like AI, these resources that I talked about, cloud democratizes a lot of them in a Web 2 setting. It gives people access to scalable computing resources. You don't need like localized GPUs to train a model, and it completely changed data storage, right? Like you could store data and interact with it somewhere that's not localized to you. The biggest thing lacking still in Web 2 and in terms of performance, right? Like we've really I feel like gone over the benefits of verifiable compute and privacy and giving users more control for egalitarian reasons, right? This is just a better outcome in creating AI for the average user. All of that applies to every use case in crypto, right? Transparency, we're making a more open system. Things are just better that way when they're even more democratized. But in terms of performance, what we're still lacking in Web 2 is interop, right? So if you have data on Google Cloud, if you have data, and then I have data on AWS, not only are they not, is there not a way for that data to communicate, but these big Web 2 companies are centralized. They have an incentive to not to interoperate, right? This problem gets orders of magnitude worse with anything related to money, right? If we want AI to handle money, it just has to be crypto. It has to be a currency that lives on an interoperable common data substrate, because this is a huge failure of our banking system. There's absolutely nothing nothing close to like a banking API or something that banks could communicate with each other very quickly, right? This is going back to like what the use case for Bitcoin, but ACH payments take weeks to settle, right? This is not something AI is not going to be able to be performant with the tools that Web 2 has today for something like smart agents. It needs blockchain technology. It needs a completely new paradigm for how smart agents can interact.
Gotcha. So Mike was talking about about 10 minutes ago about how this kind of works for the users. There's an open marketplace for you've got the people that can upload models, people that can provide compute, and then what you're saying now is like, okay, blockchain is going to also bring in this different incentive mechanism, which we should touch on, and then B, like also this ability to interoperate between different users, effectively having these open marketplaces where people can provide models and rent GPUs all on crypto rails. So if I'm a person who has compute, or if I have a warehouse of computers, or I'm just really damn good at creating models, and we've created a bunch of proprietary models. What is my incentive to come and bring this to the open marketplace in an open source manner, either for the compute or for my models? Like, if it's a money thing, what's the incentives for these decentralized AI marketplaces to actually work? Like why would I just not go to Google and be like, hey guys, like I have this, like how much is this worth to you guys?
So this can be identified with a pretty simple example. Let's say, Andy, you're the artist, the guy who really knows how to draw and have all the data regarding these cool images and all the IP, and you want to create let's say a collection of art, AI generated art, but you don't really know how to do it in a way that the actual benefits of it will go directly back to you. And then there's, let's say, the other party who's a scientist, a guy who's really good in creating models and really understands the whole math of it. I think they could, in a marketplace like this, they could come together. You could have the artist and the scientist come together, generate a model or fine tune a model with data and the actual algorithms themselves that would have a specific use case. Let's say in this case is generating images for an NFT collection that could be sold. And then they come together, they generate this algorithm or this fine-tuned model. They generate the collection, but really, who does it belong to? Was it for the guy who actually built the model, or was it for the guy who had the data and had the creativity to make things actually be purchasable and that people would really want to own? And so it's a two-sided incentive. I could provide my abilities, somebody else can provide their abilities. They could come together, and then you could have an output that is owned by both parties at the same time. And let's say every single transaction from that NFT collection goes back to both owners of the initial model that created the NFT. So it's an incentive where anybody could come and provide their capabilities, provide what they're good at, and then somebody else on the other side, where it's the demand side, could pay for it in a seamless way. And the idea is that not only could they I think there's a lot of use cases that could come and stem out from this in terms of ownership and monetization, but it's the idea of putting everything together for it to make sense to people to build these applications.
Ben, I can see you might want to add something, but I just have a quick thing here, which is that the entity or the agent that supplies that model, and then the one who supplies the art, and the one who goes and buys it, those could all be bots or AI agents themselves. So I think it's a really peculiar thing where these AI agents, maybe one's really good at making these models and these weights, and then another one's really good at designing the use case for that model. And you can just start to see how these AI agents, one, are potentially going to start owning their own assets. With that model is an asset if it can be sold and repurposed. I just think that's a really funky future that we're getting into, because then these things are just going to start acting on their own volition, and I think it'll be really weird.
I the cool thing about it's in this space, the output of one model could be the input of another, and this just generates a positive feedback loop where you just output something regarding content or an asset, and then the other model consumes it, and then you just okay, as you say, having self-sustaining, growing ecosystem digital assets, whether they're compute, it's data, it's content, it's text, it's images, and agents are speculating on each of them. And I think it's what hyper financialization of markets is what I think Nick from Allure calls it, where every single type of digital asset would be represented and speculated upon of, because there is an entity that could recognize and keep track of all of them. And it's a pretty crazy future, and I don't know. I don't think a lot of us can even like cope to what it will really look like because of the exponentiality of it. But I'm excited.
Gotcha. So let's come back to reality, boys. I know that we all love AI and a little circle jerk, but if I'm a GPU provider, if I have hardware in a warehouse, why on God's green earth am I going to just go give it to some AI marketplace in crypto when I could just go give it to Google? Like, what's the incentive?
So the more generally, the incentive in it, what's cool about crypto is that you can incentivize any behavior you want, right? And it's very
Tokens.
crypto markets are very reflexive, right? So if a lot of people agree that this is valuable, it'll make it even more valuable. If you had a GPU at home, like let's say you had a graphics card for gaming or something that's not necessarily optimized for doing floating point math and training AI, but let's say you wanted to contribute some compute. The incentive, if like for you, there's no way to do that to send it to Google headquarters in Mountain View or something like that, and contribute to Google. Crypto is all about contributing to a communal project. So there are a lot of cool compute platforms that are working on this, but basically you can whatever GPUs you have at home or whatever hardware you have at home, you can aid in doing this small amount of help training this model, and you can get paid in, say, the native token of that network. They're basically compensating you with crypto.
So it's the little guy. Like the little guy can contribute to the network, whereas they couldn't in the past.
Exactly.
I just wanted somebody to say tokens. I mean,
yeah.
Well, Andy, I think that's it. Is because like in Bitcoin proof of work, you had to have a bunch of GPUs in a garage somewhere to contribute some compute power to the network
or join a mining pool.
Transactions. We don't need that anymore. Now we have crypto economic security. So all I need to do is stake some ETH, and now I'm contributing compute.
Yeah. That's basically the right idea. Crypto lets anybody participate in doing whatever communal task, whatever common goal the network wants to do, and so for providing compute to train AI in a more decentralized way, there are a lot of really cool projects working on that that are doing a great job.
So do you guys see like 1, 2, 3 decentralized AI marketplaces winning and like being like the main ones that everybody uses, like the Lido and like the Rocket Pool and the EtherFi or the Blur and the OpenSea and the etc.? Or do you guys see a more like specialized, like more like modular kind of situation where we have different marketplaces for like more specific use cases and more specific AI trainings? And then further, like, are you guys aiming to be very general in terms of your reach for Talus, or like, is there a specific niche or area where you're really trying to like specialize in?
That's a great question. So for the market and whether or not, what kind of market this is going to be, I think it's way too early to say. I will say that, in our opinion, what Talus is working on, what we're building, I don't think anybody is building anything specifically like what we're doing. We're the common nexus of all of these inputs, compute, data, liquidity, and models to come together and operate within the same economic zone. That's the first thing. Second of all, the reason why we're building our own chain is because we couldn't see this as an application play. I don't think there's a single blockchain that exists today, L1, L2, anything that could support this specific use case of smart agents. Even the very, very high performant blockchains, we're making huge optimizations to our chain specifically geared towards smart agents. So, in that sense, I do think that AI, compared to other use cases in crypto, probably trends toward more modular, just because there are so many different inputs coming in. And if you want to build an AI application, there are so many external dependencies that it might be better to have those optimized in their own verticals in more of a modular sense. And then the last thing, what do we want to optimize for? We will have, as we're planning right now, general purpose DeFi capabilities specific to our special purpose though, which is smart agents. So we need to have the ability to exchange on our chain. We need to have certain DeFi infrastructure in order to provide liquidity best to smart agents. But this smart agent use case is really what we're focused on right now, creating autonomous agents that can execute user intents, starting with DeFi and expanding to everything else.
Awesome. Sweet. I guess the last thing from us is going to be like, where are you guys at in your product development? What do you guys have on the roadmap? How are you thinking about kind of navigating the bull market? And yeah, where are you guys at?
Yeah, so it's been a lot of work on our side. Currently, hopefully, launching some interesting partnerships over the next coming weeks. So stay tuned. We've also been like internally working on like our DevNet, which should hopefully be done within a month. So enable like people to start like interacting with the chain and like seeing what this actually looks like in reality. And yeah, I think that's like most of it. Like we'll hopefully like be releasing our light paper soon as well. So a lot of people have been asking, like, what is Talus? What is Talus? So I think we're ready to come out and say, okay, this is Talus. Come build with us, and happy to like look and research and ideate around all these use cases because they're fairly new, and we're starting to just like see the tip of the iceberg of what's really going to be the crypto NI space.
Mike and I are both in lockstep in that we set really, really aggressive timelines, and we're always pinging each other, talking about how quickly we can get to our main product. But we're really trying to tackle something that hasn't been solved yet in Web 2 or in Web 3, and there's a lot of external dependencies that we have. So the one thing that I can promise is we're going to work very hard, and everybody at Talus is incredibly focused on product and creating the best user experience possible. So if somebody's going to do it, hopefully it's us.
Awesome. It's been a pleasure, guys. Thank you for coming on. Rob, any closing thoughts, man?
I just renamed the podcast studio to Killer Use Case AI Smart Agents because I think that's where we're going. I think like AI is potentially the use case that blockchain has been missing out for all this time. So really, really cool to see this idea start to get like massaged into the real world and start to come to fruition. Best of luck on the entire development journey. And ship and drip, boys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Thanks a lot,
it.
guys.